Today's main presenter is an award-winning Jewish and Mexican-American political and community organizer, spoken word poet, social justice educator, and musician. He is a National Poetry Slam champion, a 3-time award winner at the College Union Poetry Slam Invitational, and winner of the Sonia Sanchez Langston Hughes Poetry Prize. His work has been featured in the Huffington Post, the Boston Globe, NPR, the Poetry Foundation, and the Economic Hardship Reporting Project. Please welcome Jonathan Mendoza.
What's up, everyone? How are we doing? Okay, that was like slightly better than the previous period, but they were like a third the size. So how are we doing? Yeah. I see is that a Duke sweater? A Duke sweater? Nice. I'm sorry that they didn't beat Tennessee. It's okay though. Anybody watching college basketball? 2 people, 3 people. Wow. Who do you have winning?
Bama, UConn, Bama.
Is Texas isn't still in it? Are they? Oh, they are? My bad. Okay, correct though. Alabama is gonna win because if they do, then I win $60. So, shout out to Alabama, everyone. All right. I have another question for you. What is the best dipping sauce? Ketchup? Mustard? Ranch? Sweet Baby Ray's, very specific. Anything? Okay. The correct answer is tangy barbecue sauce. But good job. Ode to tangy barbecue sauce. My sweet melted sugar butter. My delectable delight. Maple syrup ketchup. High fructose brown thick Gatorade dip. Who would I have become without your blessings? Few items of McD's could I enjoy in the company of friends. Mother too kosher and too dietitian for me to ever have neared the monolithic Whopper. But you, my sweet tangy, my sauce-alicious saucy, you steadfast salvation at the 2:30 a.m. drive-thru, respite from the anxiety of a 3 a.m. chiding from parents upon our return home. Route 126 Enterprise, the only location open at the hours of possums. You entertain the wrath of newly licensed teens, pleading for the McFlurry machine to not be broken, even as we all know it is working perfectly fine. Suburban oasis, fountain of youth, even in my late 20s, as my awareness of my eventual end dependably increases. Red mustard juice permeating my teeth, my gums, my still good jaw bones. Oh, sweet awareness of the inevitable. You rock me to sleep sometimes. Even when all the preservatives have burrowed into my blood, you linger on my tongue, savoring the day to keep me awake. A bad feeling for the night, a good memory for the morning. Cool. How is tangy barbecue sauce? Did I convince you? No, not really. Okay, show of hands, who said honey mustard? Okay, ketchup? Ranch. Okay, this section is very big into ranch over here. I don't know if you did that intentionally. Barbecue sauce? Okay, this is a good crew. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about myself and then I'll do some more poems. That's me. This is my website at the bottom if anybody is interested in learning more about me later. But I wanna start off first with like a very brief meditation. Who and what brought you here? What I hope to talk about today is a bit of like the experiences that informed me and kind of like the input into who I am. And then later a little bit about the output, which you got a brief sample of there. But it's like from all the things I'm created of, what do I want to put out into the world? What are the things I want to create and kind of inject that don't already exist, right? Well, first thing about this, who and what brought you here? It can be very literal, if it was a bus or a car or a bike. It can be your parents, mentors, grandparents, guardians. However you want to interpret this, just take a brief 20, 30 seconds. Feel free to close your eyes if you prefer, and meditate on who and what brought you here. Anybody feel up to sharing? It can just be like a word. Just throw our hands up if there's something that came to mind right there.
Definitely my feet.
Your feet. Perfect. Perfect answer. Love that. Thankful for our feet, whatever gets us to go from one place to another. Any other answers? What'd y'all think about? How about here?
The bus.
The bus?
My AirPods.
Your AirPods. Beautiful. Can you say more?
Just because they help me like do the hallways, I guess.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, there's certain things, right? Like if we don't have them in our day, it's tough for us to get to where we need to go, even if it's music, podcasts, whatever it is, right? I'm gonna share a little bit about what brought me here, and about who I am. So first and foremost, most important, I'm a proud Virgo. Any other Virgos here? Yes, thank you. Yes, give it up for Virgos, everybody. Big round of applause. Feel free to do a standing ovation if you want. But I don't believe in astrology, that's the catch. I was born in Massachusetts in a town called Framingham. It's about 30, 40 minutes west of Boston. And my mom is descended from Jewish Eastern European immigrants, about third or fourth generation, settled in New York. And my dad immigrated from Chihuahua, Mexico at a very young age. That is my dad at the top right. He's a musician, he's a vibraphone player. And my grandfather, who passed away a few years ago, but he's a guitarist and a painter, and a singer and composer. My grandfather left Mexico while my dad was like kind of being born, and he went to the U.S. to work as like a traveling musician and painter, and earned some small modicum of money to send back to my dad's family, his mom in Mexico. At the age of 10, my dad realized he really hadn't met his grandfather, and so he decided that he wanted to venture out and meet him, and go to the U.S. Southwest and Arizona and New Mexico and a little bit in California. And that's where he kind of fell in love with music by learning the craft of his dad. So that's one side of my family, right? The other side, my mom has always been in public health. She is like lifelong, super passionate about serving communities, especially those who are like marginalized and struggle with access to healthcare, and just instilled it from an early age that value in me of really caring about folks who are suffering and who need care the most. So I grew up at the intersection of thinking about that kind of public service from my mom's side, and also appreciating wanting to create something really beautiful for the world through an artistic practice through my dad and grandfather. And that kind of fused into me doing a lot of what I do. But while growing up with my racial identity and kind of perceiving inequalities racially and with regard to class on both sides of my family, I had a lot of questions about race, migration, multiraciality, privilege and class inequality, and also just broader systems of inequality, U.S.-Mexico relations and the global South, and all these kinds of questions I was struggling with. That really festered in me, right? It was like a tension that felt uneasy. I couldn't just know about problems and feel like, oh, well, okay, that's a problem. There's nothing I can do about it. I just really felt an inclination to do something to address it. And what that kind of led me to is kind of three main practices. So one being an artist, right? So my main medium here is poetry or spoken word sometimes. Music, I also compose and do some songwriting, and film, which I'll maybe talk about later, but initially growing up, I wanted to just tell stories that kind of could change communities and societies, and I felt that the best avenue was film for that. But now, as a poet, I kind of am able to tour around the country and perform locally, do readings, talks, workshops. And with that last piece on workshops, I'm really passionate as an educator. I just feel that certain skills or knowledge about how to do an artistic practice shouldn't just be like kept to one individual. I really believe in sharing it as much as possible, and not just supporting my own voice, but also supporting the voices of others. So getting these kinds of tools of poetry, art, community organizing into different communities, especially those who kind of been long neglected, right? People of color, immigrants, young people. And last but not least, as an organizer, I'm just curious, by show of hands, has anybody heard like the term community organizer? Yeah, a few people? Okay, what does it kind of mean to you? Yeah.
I mean, it means that you're like working on the grassroots level to get people like engaged in the politics and energized to like make change.
Awesome, wow. Dictionary definition, that was perfect, thank you. Give it up for that definition, that was great. Okay. All right, so like commonly termed as like an activist, you might see on the news people marching and protesting and chanting. That's very much the tip of the iceberg. Beneath that is a whole lot of meeting with people one-on-one and building connections between community and dialogues and educational sessions to learn about different issues. And so that's kind of a lot of what I do, is probably most of my time lately. But especially thinking about democracy, how to build an inclusive multiracial democracy, and thinking about immigrant rights, housing justice, youth power, and a whole lot more. And that is me on the right. That was taken last year. And that's my brother on the left. I know, I got a haircut. I look a little different. I never look happy when my brother's holding me. That's interesting. How I got into writing. So as I mentioned, I kind of developed that worldview from an early age of reckoning with social injustices. And also what I would do about it, and that was mainly storytelling and organizing. I kind of had these multi-faceted like artistic pursuits, but when I was in high school, there was like a high school poetry slam, a high school-wide slam, and that got me really intrigued. It just seems like a really powerful tool that I want to tap into. During high school, I did a summer program where I learned of this poet named Julian Curry. I highly recommend you Google him, and it should be like one of the first videos that appears. It's about the history of the N-word and the use of that word throughout different periods of the US and its significance today. And I just was floored by the idea that someone in about 2 minutes could say some words that completely warp my perception of a really critical piece of history. And I was just like, this is a tool that I want to learn. I want to be able to use it. I want to be able to change people's perceptions on issues the same way that he did for me. And so that's what I did. I, coming out of high school, went to Emerson College, bottom left, and did a year of film, because that's still what I felt I wanted to do. But as I got more and more immersed in poetry, I realized like this is really how I want to like tell stories. I transferred to Berklee College of Music for a number of like personal and financial reasons, but I was able to kind of like craft my own major and explore this intersection of art and social justice and poetry and politics. And I was very fortunate. Let's see here. On the left there, I was able to get a lot of recognition at kind of these national college poetry slams. I'm wearing that same exact sweater today on the left there. You can't really see it, but I accidentally shrank it in the dryer a couple days ago, so that's really sad. And that was in Austin, Texas. And in the middle was in 2015, we won the National Poetry Slam out in Oakland, and representing the team from Boston. And then on the right, I was able to produce a book. I produced a little chapbook with an independent press, and that was a huge joy for me. I want to share a poem, and then we can like hold on this and then see if there's any questions. But yeah, I want to share a poem. It's a little bit older, but it's actually one of the ones I shared at that National Poetry Slam. It's a little bit about my identity and kind of how that informs a lot of what we are speaking about. So this is called Brown Boy, White Boy, and it's after Angel Nafis and John Sands. Biracial boy in social justice seminar is asked to join a racial affinity group. People of color or white. White boy does not want to infiltrate safe space for people of color. Brown boy does not want to keep white people from having honest, constructive dialogue. Biracial boy does not know what he is. recalls posting a survey on Facebook in middle school asking how people categorize him. That would determine his clothes, his music, how he spoke. Biracial boy wishes his skin came with an instruction manual. Brown boy tells white boy he should not identify as a person of color, that he can pass, that he should not appropriate a struggle that is not his. White boy tells brown boy he will not identify as white, erase the brown from his blood, will not be the one who finishes the colonization of his own body. White boy visits family in Mexico, realizes he is the whitest intruder since conquistadors. Brown boy goes to white synagogue, is in the only family not invited to the dinner party. Biracial boy is welcome everywhere. Biracial boy is not welcome anywhere. Biracial boy is tug of war, but biracial boy is both sets of hands, pulling at each end. And biracial boy is sorry for this poem, for taking up space. Does not know if it's his white self that's doing so, if it's even letting the brown self speak. White boy apologizes for his privilege. Brown boy resents white boy for taking up so much space with apologies. White boy says, I'm sorry. Brown boy says, you're doing it again. Brown boy hates his white. This legacy like shingles all over his face. White boy gone, but biracial boy to brown family is still white. Still looks like coyote. Biracial boy is both the discolored sheep of each family and the dog that hunts it. Wishes he were purebred and not a mutt. Brown boy asks white boy what it's like not to get profiled, to go to your cousin's wedding in Arizona and feel safe. White boy goes to white barbecue, meets white cop. White cop does not know boy is biracial. Starts talking immigration policy. Brown boy screams, hides inside white skin. White skin silent, white skin shield, white boy protector, white boy savior. Brown boy does not need white savior. Strikes back at white self. A biracial boy during Latinx uprising does not know if he should sit down or speak up, to which army society has drafted him. Biracial boy is tug of war, but biracial boy is the rope, is frame, cannot hold his selves together. Biracial boy hates being two different selves, recalls it's the world that made him this way, that split him in half, housed oppressor and oppressed, insect and the boot, and biracial boy is both of them. Cool, I want to pause there for questions. Any questions so far? Oh yeah, I see hand there.
How long does it take you to write a poem and feel confident enough to share it with people?
It's a great question. I think there's kind of like some concentric circle process. I think the first draft, first couple drafts maybe, it might just be me. I can like only share it with myself. It's just scrappy. I'm just getting it on paper. I probably don't feel too good about it, but I can read it aloud to myself and get a few more drafts. Try to get it to a place where maybe I can like show it to a friend, right? And maybe that's like draft 4 or 5 or something like that. I'm like, all right, I think I got something here that I want to like show to someone that it feels like worth their time to look at. And then maybe after that I get another draft and show it to a few more people. And then draft 6 or 7, it's like, okay, I want to test this out. I'm gonna share this at an open mic, or the first poem that I read, like that's only I don't know, maybe 3rd or 4th draft, right? So it's like still pretty new. I'm still gonna change a lot, but I want to test it out, and I share it with y'all, and am able to try to think like, oh, maybe I want to change this word or change this line, but at that point I still have like the general idea, and so I feel comfortable sharing it with a crowd like y'all. Also, I trust all of you dearly, so that's why. And I would say a caveat is that this can change depending on the poem. I like really don't care much. Not that I don't care about your opinions, but I don't care much about sharing a poem about an ode to tangy barbecue sauce with y'all. That's gonna be really different if I'm sharing something about like a deep personal trauma, right? I might not just bring a rough draft of that to like brand new people. That might take like a lot more time to develop and craft. So yeah, I think it varies, but I will say that I think generally when I was younger, I waited too long to show people my mess. And if you have a friend, if you have a teacher, peers, whatever, and you just want to show them like your messy draft, don't feel like it has to be perfect. Just show it and you'll get the feedback you'll need. Even just reading it aloud sometimes to someone else, you hear it yourself and you're like, oh, that's what I want to change. So just like, I encourage y'all to like, as soon as you're comfortable, just start reading it to people, share it with people, and you'll kind of craft it along the way. Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, firstly, I'd like to start by saying I really loved the poem. It was really well written.
Thank you.
And, well, I think that, like, when you're sharing poetry that talks about your experiences, it definitely has the potential to make a large impact on people and change perspectives. So how do you typically, like to present your writing? Because I can imagine that posting your writing online on a blog is different than, like, it has a different impact than presenting in front of a group of people. So what route do you typically take?
That's a great question. I'll say this, I'm like really bad at self-promotion. I like hate, like I will tweet all the SpongeBob memes in the world, but when it comes to like tweeting an important poem of mine, SpongeBob memes it is, right? So I think like I struggle with that, to be honest, like just sharing things out in the open on the internet where I feel like I kind of have almost less control in a way, because even if, I get the illusion of like, oh, I can make it private or whatever, like someone's gonna screenshot it, they're gonna share it, and it just like lives there. And 5-10 years from now, if I'm like, oh, I don't know about that poem I put out there, like it's there, like it's in the world. So that feels like it has a lot more permanence to it. Whereas I think with you all, like I feel more comfortable sharing maybe a new draft of something, because I know it's not gonna like live on social media or the internet or somewhere. So I think like sometimes it'll be, I might have a poem that I feel like is done and it's pretty much the same like month to month, year to year, but I'll share it for a while, and then maybe 2-3 years later someone asks me like, oh hey, do you want to submit a poem for this journal or whatever, and I'll look through and I'm like, oh yeah, this poem's done. Like I've shared it and revised it enough, it feels like it can live in a bit more of a permanent state on the internet. So yeah, that's how I kind of tend to operate. I think video is interesting because sometimes I'll like read something and it's captured on video and then they'll upload it to YouTube and I might change it later. Like even that poem that I just shared, like that's on YouTube with like some small edits. Like I changed that, and I don't think people always realize that poetry especially is still like a pretty living, breathing thing. That like I oftentimes will revise after I just become a more developed person. Yeah. Did I see another hand behind?
Yeah. How do you like come up with all the different analogies that you use to like, kind of describe the problems that you face? Because you're very descriptive in the words you use.
Yeah. Thank you. So how do I come up with like different analogies for the problems I face? That's a great question. I'd say like one, there's different exercises, like there's very technical things you can do of just understanding like metaphor and how metaphors function. There's a really great book, it's called The Poetry Handbook by Mary Oliver, and she goes through like all these, it's a pretty short book, but she goes through like every single literary technique that you can use, and some like exercises to like get some practice to them. But you can literally be like, just have on one list, like have a list, right? 2 columns. On the left side, have it be like auditorium, right? And then write everything that you know about an auditorium to be true. Like it can hold a lot of people. There's a lot of chairs. There's maybe it's a little bit cold, or whatever it is you want to describe the auditorium. And then on the right side, there's two things you can do. One is like try to find different metaphors for each of those things. It's like what else has a lot of chairs, or what else can hold a lot of people. You know, maybe it's like, I don't know, like it's a school of fish, or it's a nest of eggs, or whatever it is, right? Getting creative with it and stretching the language. And then the other thing you could do is like, okay, you have auditorium on the left side, and then on the right side, what's something that you could maybe compare to an auditorium? Any ideas? Give it a sec. What about like something that can just like hold a lot of people? Yeah.
Definitely have to say a Broadway stage.
Broadway stage? Yeah, right. So maybe if the auditorium is like pretty noisy and boisterous or something like that, and you can have like as a Broadway stage of a school, something like that, right? That's like, we would want to dig into that more, but you could write on the right side of the column like Broadway stage, and what are all the things that align between a Broadway stage and a school auditorium. So there's very technical things like that, but I'd also say just like engaging with as much other content as possible. A lot of metaphors come from nature, so like if that's your vibe, like learning about science and nature, history, just like the more you inform yourselves of things like about your world, the more you'll have to pull from for these kinds of analogies and metaphors. Cool. I hope that answered it. Yeah? Cool. Yeah.
What would you do with poems that you had scrapped a while ago, but suddenly rediscovered?
That's a great question. What would I do with poems I scrapped a while ago that I suddenly rediscovered? Can I ask, is this like something that you're experiencing too?
I haven't really experienced it, but as this presentation has gone on, I sort of just thought of it
Yeah.
like 8 minutes ago.
Yeah. I love digging things back up. I think there's so many times where I feel like I had an idea. It's one thing to like have an idea for a poem, it's another thing to try to execute it. And sometimes I'm just like not in the right place to execute it. And sometimes I'm like struggling to come up with an idea, and then I'll dig back. I have like in my iPhone notes, I have like a folder just for poems, and anything that's even like a line or two, an idea, some scattered thoughts, I'll put in that folder. And so if I feel like I need to generate more content, whether it's for like a book project or something like that, I will dig back through that folder and just see what can I find that I can flesh out. And there might be something from like 3-4 years ago that at the time I was like, oh my gosh, this is a good idea. I just like cannot execute it for the life of me. But now I feel 3-4 years later, I'm in a better place to tackle that. Maybe I feel more learned, more mature. My understanding of it is more developed. And so I love fleshing things out like that. I do the same thing with music too. Sometimes I'll just like record tiny little snippets of something and come back to it years later and just feel like I have the skill and ability to really unpack it. So I highly encourage keeping all your scraps somewhere, even if it's just like in a folder somewhere. Yeah.
How do you like get yourself to feel comfortable presenting or like sharing poems about like really personal things in front of like big audiences?
Yeah, big audiences. It's definitely, it takes a lot of time. I think there are times in my life where I shared something that's like very vulnerable that I don't think I gave myself enough time. I think I felt pressure because I felt like I had to impress people or get attention for some reason. And I wasn't like actually ready. I think like even that poem I shared with you earlier, when I wrote it, I think I had some distance, some healthy amount of distance between me and the thing. I think if I tried to write it like when I was in the thick of the problem, that would have been really hard, and maybe it could have been really good and emotionally cathartic, but I think it was also good for me to like write down like a few things, have some distance, maybe it's a couple months, a couple years, and then come back to it and reflect. And so now when I share, it like really feels pretty matter of fact, I try to like let the poem do the emotional work for itself, because this point, I kind of just feel like I'm looking back at a portrait of a younger version of myself, and it's like, huh, yeah, that's where I was at that time. I'm no longer there now, but I have that healthy distance of separation. So, yeah, I'd say in short, like it takes practice and just getting used to. If you just generally have stage fright, that's super real. I mean, there's like plenty of tools that you can get probably from teachers and friends and mentors. As I said, starting with a small circle and expanding is good. But also don't feel like you have to push yourself to share something extremely vulnerable if you like legitimately don't want to. If you do and it feels challenging, but you can still do it, like go for it. But if it's like, no, this is actually gonna like set me back a lot, like there's no need to do that. So yeah, that's helpful. I'm gonna do, let's see, how are we on time actually? What time does the period end? 45? Okay, cool. I'm gonna do another poem. Is it okay if I share? I'm gonna share a more vulnerable one that's like, it has some distance with it. Okay, so this one, I'll give a content warning. It's like, has to do with like mental health and yeah, like more serious mental health issues. Is that okay with folks? Cool? Yeah? All right. I wrote this a long time ago, a very long time ago, but it was mentioned by your teachers, so I'll share it. In the spirit of also like having healthy distance from a thing that I feel I can share with y'all. For quiet boys, we are not blank slates nor empty. We are not dry minds nor desert soul, simply shriveled tongue, too afraid to add to a world that has already clothed us in gray. When others thank you for your silence, for being small mouth and whole heart, you do not tell them that you are a funnel, great pain and little voice. You do not tell them of the therapists, all sound and no ear, or of the teachers who will joke about pills on the day of your first prescription. You do not tell them of your depression. When you first learned that tall girls do not fall for short boys, you swallowed love like a tennis ball. When your parents screamed a downstairs kitchen into shattered glass, you dove into your brother's shoulder like it were quicksand. And the day your father moved away, airport terminals became training grounds for quelling emotion. But for this, for the first time you ever considered killing yourself, will you be silent? You are 19 years of doubt, 16 years of shy, 13 years of fearing death, and 2 months of wanting it. You are broken, and you will say it over and over until its bitterness begins to taste sweet to you. I'm broken, I'm broken. I'm unheard cry and whispered tragedy. I'm my mother's tears and my father's speechlessness. I'm the last cut branch of family. I am family. I am brother. I am son. I'm love. I am friend. I am hope. I am voice. I am voice. I'm here and breaking, and I will not become body found too early and note found too late. I will grab onto loved ones like ledges and let them yank the suicidal from my throat. I'm not broken. I've not yet been broken. Say it over and over until it sticks to your mouth like taffy. You have not yet been broken. You have not yet been cracked, but you will crack louder for every self-absorbed therapist and backhanded teacher, for pain and glass and quicksand, for tears and screams inside you that have not been let free. You are 19 years of being spoken to, 16 years of speaking back, 13 years of living, 10 minutes of living, and 2 months of still hanging on. You are not broken. You are not broken. Say it until you realize you have never been this way. Speak it until you learn that you are not alone. Scream it until its echo slaps you back and you learn your power to everyone around you. You are breaking. You are not broken. You have not yet been broken. So for quiet boys, scream. doing? Doing all right? Fair. That was a little heavier one, a little heavier poem. I can share like with that a little bit about like why I write, right? So I think like kind of illustrated by that poem, catharsis. I think just artistic expression has been important to me throughout my life. Like I think I'm just like also just a very emotional person. I feel things pretty heavily, and so having some like very accessible outlet has been really important since a young age. Which I highly encourage for everyone, right? It doesn't have to be writing. It can be music or sports or dance or whatever it is, drawing. But don't feel like you have to be like the best ever at it. Like just have it as a practice. I think it's just what I believe is like one of the most important things to like truly experience life in a fulfilling way is to like be able to process these emotions through these different practices. Another reason to write is I feel it is an extension of my activism and organizing. I think there's like political work that can only do so much, and poetry and art, I think and hope, can access people and connect with people in a way that other mediums can't, mainly by connecting with people's emotional experiences and intuition. And that can really create a stronger connection, I think, to these, combating these issues of social injustice. The last thing I'd say is that a lot of times our stories get told for us, right? We can like turn on the TV and see the CBS and ABC and NBC News, like maybe crafting certain narratives about our identities or whether it's age or gender, race, whatever it is, and don't necessarily afford us the opportunity for us to tell our own stories. You are each unique, you have your own story to tell. And I encourage you to kind of like use art to create your own media, however that is feasible for you. And here's a little slideshow here. So on the left is I facilitate a workshop there for in Western Massachusetts for folks who've like experienced houselessness, or we're supporting folks who've experienced houselessness on how to use poetry as a tool for mental health and almost for psychotherapy, especially for people who can't afford more traditional means of treatment for mental health issues. In the middle, I got the opportunity to speak at a immigrant rights rally and march in downtown Boston after the 2016 election, and that was really powerful to be able to, in such an immediate way, connect my poetry with my community organizing work. On the right, I gave a workshop at the Museum of Mexican Art in Chicago in Pilsen, where I lived for a number of years, and did a little bit of a youth workshop, like visual art and poetry thing there, and that has been like really fruitful and inspiring for me to be able to like take some of my learnings and offer them to folks who are kind of developing their own sense of identity at a younger age in artistic practice. Okay. I'll share this as like one, perhaps last tool. It can be like really, well, let me just ask, who here, can you raise your hand if you have like some artistic practice already that you enjoy? Doesn't mean you have to feel good at it, whatever. Okay, awesome, most people. Can you just shout it out, like what do you like to do? Right? Photography, theater? Awesome. So cool. I love to see that. There's a lot of, so hold on to those, right? Like I think later in life people are like, oh, I'm gonna put this aside because I don't really need it. But I encourage folks to hold on to them however you can. When I get overwhelmed with what stories I want to tell, what art I want to create, this Venn diagram is something I made that has been somewhat useful for me sometimes. On the left, think about what stories feel most urgent for me to tell. On the right, and so just thinking like, what is that fire inside you that's telling you like, I want and need to tell this story. On the right, what stories feel most urgent for the world to hear. All right, like I'm staying with a friend in Chicago, and he has like this fluffy cat. I would love to tell a story about that cat. Is it the most urgent thing for the world to hear? Perhaps not. Let me think about that one, right? And then at the bottom, what stories are you uniquely positioned to tell? Right, so there's like a lot of voices, a lot of stories out there in the world. Maybe each of them has something that's urgent for them to say and for the world to hear. But also, you're unique. Right? You have a unique experience, identity, background. Is out of all of those tens or hundreds of stories that you're thinking about, is there one that like is really unique for what you can tell? This isn't like fixed, as in to say like it has to meet all three criteria. But it can be a useful tool when you feel overwhelmed with the sheer amount of stories or ideas you have on your hand. And is the one thing that I use to think about this. Okay, I know we're coming up on time, but you want to say, we mentioned earlier about thinking about what's kind of your input, your identity, your background experience, and informs what you want to do. When you leave here today, think about what do you want to bring into the world, right? With that in mind, the things, whether it's your music and your AirPods, the feet that take you around, you have the capacity to be in certain places that other people don't. And what do you want to do with that, right? So what will you bring into the world? What do you want to bring into the world? And yeah, I think maybe there's like 30 seconds if anybody wants to ask a quick question. We can leave it on that. Any other questions? Here. Oh, never mind. Sorry. You can ask me after. I also have books if anybody's interested. We can come say hi. Thank you, everyone.